Welcome to the Savvy Working Mom Podcast. This is the place where we share strategies to help you create a life you love. I'm your host, Whitney, a real-life working mom in the tech industry, professional speaker, and coach. I'm going to help you figure out how to work and mom in a way that brings you joy by using simple systems and through interviews with other working moms who are making it work. Remember that with intentional and daily action, you can live your best days now and forever. Dr. Maria Harsha-Wusu is a physician, advocate, and educator whose work is fueled by her commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. She is the CEO and co-founder of the Collective for Anti-Racism in Medicine, a collective of physician educators and leaders from across the country who partner with healthcare organizations, professionals, and educators to implement anti-racist tools and strategies. Dr. Wusu is passionate about working to dismantle racism and other systems of oppression within medicine in pursuit of health equity. In addition to making the world a better place through her work, she is also making the world a better place through her family. She is a wife and mother of 2 daughters, ages 4 and 7. She loves spending time with her family and friends, reading, dancing, and eating delicious food. Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Whitney. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So full disclosure, everyone, Maria and I know each other, and she had shared a story with me that I thought y'all would appreciate listening to because you've probably all been there. I know I've been there as a mom who is a breadwinner in our family, and Maria is married to a doctor as well. And that played out in a really, I would say, funny, but kind of sad way with her daycare. Maria, can you share your story?
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. For background, like you said, I live in a 2-physician household. And for those of you who aren't familiar with medical training, you do medical school and become a doctor. And then you do a residency where you're learning more skills to become a physician. And then after that, you get a job. For me, that first job was faculty. And in addition to starting as faculty, I had my first daughter at the end of residency. I was a chief resident when I was pregnant with her and had her in April. And then in January of the following year, when I went back to work, I was now a full-time faculty physician, supervising residents, had my own clinic, and I now had a very young daughter who was in a daycare. And so navigating all of those challenges, like a lot of people, what is it going to look like to be a mom, a physician, and balance kind of these new roles for me, a lot of new roles at the same time. So there was one time where my daughter was sick and I was in my primary care clinic, which was very busy, full of patients. And I noticed that I had been getting some calls from the daycare. So as soon as I was done with my clinical work, I answered the phone, and it was my daughter's daycare telling me that, like many babies do in that first exposure to daycare, she had a fever and they needed me to come pick her up right away. So I tried to wrap up everything at clinic very quickly. My husband was still a resident, so that's, a physician in training, and he's a surgeon, and I knew he wouldn't be able to get away or get there quickly. And actually, when we lived in Boston, I had the only car and he biked. So I knew I had to be the one to go pick up our daughter. So I rushed, wrapped up things at clinic, got to the daycare, picked her up. And when I got there, one of her teachers just kind of had this disappointed look on her face and said, when we call, you really need to pick up the phone right away when you call, because that means there's something going on here. And I said, I'm so sorry. I was in clinic. Did you try to call her father at all when I wasn't able to get to the phone? And she said, no, why would we call her father? We know that he's a doctor. And in that moment, I was so taken aback. I can't even tell you what I initially said. I just took a breath, and I might have said, I'm a doctor too, but I honestly don't know. I took a breath. I was like, well, thank you so much. I'm here now. Took my daughter home. Then, of course, as you may know, made all the arrangements for what I was going to do with her because she would be home for the next couple of days. But when I finally had a moment to reflect, I was like, that moment just hit me because, one, like you said, we're both doctors. I'm a doctor. My husband is also a doctor. But also, he was still a physician in training, which, not to diminish the work that happens in training, but you're still being supervised by another doctor. So you technically could be taken away from the team, whereas I was an attending physician. It was my own clinic, my own patients that I was seeing in that role, and there's no one to take my place if I were to step away. And I think it was just one of those moments when I realized, despite the equity that we tried to talk about and strive for in our home, when we talked about, bringing children into our family and what that might look like, particularly at the stage of life and career we were at, that there was this perception in society that as the mother, there was some sense of obligation and responsibility that I had to my children that was not shared by my partner, no matter what we decided within the walls of our own home. And I think that, and similar stories I could go on, but that really shaped the way that I thought about motherhood, both how I wanted to define it for myself and how people outside of my house were going to try and define it for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I think it's interesting because as moms, as working moms, I think most of us have been through something like that. And so I don't know if there's a lesson there or not, but I think there's definitely some solidarity to know, like, I'm not the only one. We're not the only one. Become the default parent, right? Who the daycare or the school looks to, even when our partner may or may not be available, right? And oftentimes, right, in this instance, maybe more available. At least that's happened. I know that has happened to me in the past, where once I used to travel a lot for work, and the daycare was blowing up my phone. I was in the airport. And so I literally text my husband. I was like, can you call the daycare? Have they called you? And he's like, they haven't called me. So I picked up the phone as I got seated into my seat on the plane and was like, yep, what's going on? Is everything okay? And they're like, no, same. Your child is sick. Somebody needs them up. And I was like, okay, I'm on a plane and my husband is listed as the primary parent. Did you call him? Did you call him? Like, you skipped over the primary parent and called the secondary parent because they hadn't called him. They just decided to blow up my phone the whole time. And it's wild, the societal construct around this, even when there's process in place, like listing a primary parent with the phone number. It's just the way that we have brought up whatever's happening in the back of our head jumps ahead of the process, right? And even when you suggest, like you said, or not suggest, when you decide within your own home, like you and your husband did, like, hey, this is how we're going to function as a family, you still can oftentimes, I think, push up against what society is saying and how you should function as a family. And then you got to navigate that, right? It's just, I guess, a part of how we evolve as a society.
Exactly. I think I told you a story of when I was this was more recently, on a girls' trip with my best girlfriends from college, and we were off the coast of Spain. And earlier, the day before, I had learned that my 4-year-old was sick with a fever, and they thought maybe it was strep throat. But similar to your experience, I'm away. I'm not the person who took her to the doctor's appointment, but the healthcare provider called me to, update me on all the results, check in with me. And I'm sure on their end, they felt like, this is helpful communication. A lot of times I think that we get a little extra communications because they know that we're physicians calling me about every little thing, kind of run it by me like a healthcare courtesy, one doctor to another. But I was literally heading to the beach and I was like, I don't want to talk about amoxicillin right now. I want to have a cocktail and relax with my girlfriends and kick back. But like you said, it's kind of those expectations, even when we put other things in place. And my partner is a fully capable partner and knows what amoxicillin is as well.
Because he's also a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Or any parent that has had a kid for more than 2 years knows what amoxicillin is.
We all know what amoxicillin is. So thinking about expectations, transitioning a little bit, one of the things that I really like to talk about on this show is how we really should on ourselves, right? The things that you tell yourself, I should do this, I should do that, oftentimes are things that you don't need to do or want to do, but for some reason are feeling pressured to do. And as we think about being parents, right, before we had kids, right, when our babies were on their way to us, however they came to us, I think we all imagine what it's going to be like to be a mom, right? You're thinking about, this is the kind of mom I'm going to be. This is what I want to do for my children. This is how I want us to live our lives. And a lot of that can come from internally what you truly believe and want. And some of that can come from what society is telling you it should look like. And figuring out the difference, I think, isn't always easy. So thinking about you and your household where you have two very busy working parents, and at this point, 2 girls, ages 4 and 7, so lots of energy, I'm sure lots of activities, possibly different schools. How do you figure out what you should and shouldn't do? And can you share something, or what you will and won't do, I guess is what we should say. And will you share an example of something you decided, hey, you know what, that's not for me and my family, that maybe is pushing against what society is telling you should do?
Yeah, I love this question because I think just in my life and my work, I've always kind of questioned some of the things that we hold on to as a society that I think are not necessarily for the greater good of society. And so I think for background, I was raised by a stay-at-home mom who did go back to work, but part-time once I went into school. So she's very, very present. I sometimes joke that she's kind of like a June Cleaver, like, cooking, baking, dinner on the table, took us to all of our activities. And so that was the model I had motherhood. And I think as myself, I'm a person who really values quality time. That's the way that I show that I'm doing something that is meaningful to me. And so I'm very present and dedicated to my work, very dedicated and present at that time to my patients. And then I saw myself as being a very dedicated and present mother. And what that looked like for me was probably shaped largely by my own mother, even though we entered motherhood in very different circumstances and different times, actually. So one thing for me is that because my partner and I are both physicians, we always had help, because with clinical and hospital hours, the times that we needed to be work were often outside of the regular hours for like a daycare or a preschool. And so we've always had someone like a family assistant or a nanny that was there to help us kind of take our children to and from places. And once I changed jobs, I've changed academic institutions a few times, moving with my partner, who's also in medicine, career moves that he needed to make. In new positions, I realized even when that time opened up, like let's say I had clinic that started at 8 a.m. and technically I could drop off the kids at 7, that it was kind of this whirlwind rush. I was waking up little people before they wanted to be woken up. I was feeling like it was a very rushed and hectic start to my day. And that wasn't really the way that I wanted to start my day. I also am someone who has never loved driving. Like in my dream life, if I could just have someone, not necessarily like an Uber, but someone I know personally, drive me around, that would be great. And I could just sit back and relax, and I don't have to be the one navigating traffic or having to park. And so as I transitioned from full-time clinical work into social entrepreneurship, I really had to take a moment and think. I technically would, and I'm putting that in quotes, be available in the mornings and the afternoons to take and drop off my children at 2 different locations for school every day. And I think for a while, I maybe navigated some of that, doing some of the drop-offs and some of the pickups when I could. And I realized that it just took a huge amount of time out of my day. It really drained my energy in a way that was not productive once I did return back home, in terms of the work I was trying to accomplish, or even the type of engagement I wanted to have with my kids and my family later in the evening. And so I decided with my partner that we would keep our family assistant. And one of the primary things that she does is that she drives our kids to and from school. And that's something that I often share with a lot of people, a lot of other mothers. And I think what's important to note is that it came out of a place about what is important to me? What do I actually value? And what I actually value is quality time with my children and with my family when it comes to who I am as a mother. I love cooking dinner every single day. I love eating dinner as a family. I love playing games with them. I love having the energy that regular toddler nuances and maybe sometimes frustrations don't completely derail the relationship and connection I have with my children. And that it's so much easier for me to show up in the way I want to when I am rested and I have energy. And so I found that by not driving my kids to and from school, one, I could start my morning more slowly. I can always get in some form of movement or exercise, which is really important to me to feel like I'm able to move through my day after taking care of myself. And then at the end of the day, while they're getting transported back from an activity or school, I'm able to prepare dinner. That's important to me because everyone in my family loves food and we love to eat. So we can have that mealtime together and then have meaningful family time at the end of the day. So I think what's important in that is that might not be what makes sense for everyone, but for me, given both my relationship with driving and my relationship to motherhood and what I valued most. That's an example of how I chose what I valued most rather than what would be kind of what makes sense or what most people would do if they were in my same circumstances.
I love that. And what I'm hearing is one, thinking about values and what do you value? And then two, thinking about time and also energy and what is the impact of the things that you're doing on your time and energy, right? So I think there's a lot of parallels with things that happen in the household that, using air quotes, good moms should do, right? If we're thinking about the June Cleaver stereotypical type of mom, right? Drive your kids to and from activities, cook the food, do the laundry, clean up the house. All of those things are things that maybe good moms should do. And you're saying, hey, for me, driving actually, yes, I have the time, but it makes my energy poor. So then later in the day, I can't be the mom that I want to be, right? And for someone else, that choice might be, that thing might be laundry, or it could be cooking. So instead of spending that time making meals, which really zaps you of your energy, you outsource that a lot, or you delegate that a lot by picking stuff up from the grocery or ordering in, right? And if that's who you are, you may also be the kind of person who finds value in driving, right? And having that time alone in the car with your children. And so I think this is just it's a very interesting way to think about how we show up to each of the different tasks in our life and what those tasks do to our ability to be the woman that we want to be the mom that we want to be, or even be the worker that we want to be. And where there's an activity that doesn't necessarily align with our values, or is that pulling away from our values, and where there's an activity where, yes, we might have the time, but it makes our energy cranky, we should try to figure out how to not do those things, or at least do them at a minimum if we have the opportunity and the means to figure out to do that.
Yeah, and I attribute stepping into motherhood at the same time that my career was going into a next stage as kind of helping me figure out that lesson. In medical training, basically, you don't make any of your own decisions. You're going where someone tells you to be. You're working as many hours as they tell you to work. And you're supposed to do that with this sense of kind of pride and gratitude for the work that you're able to do because it's seen as very impactful and meaningful, but also not complain about things like exhaustion or not getting sleep or the demands that are uncompensated because the work that we do saves lives. And I think that when I moved into being faculty and at the same time I was new to motherhood, I really was thinking a lot about what work do I want to do. It was the first time I was able to have a choice about what I wanted my career to look like, or what aspects of being a physician were going to be included in my own career. And for me, that was doing some primary care clinic, but that was not the majority of my work. It was teaching learners and residents, and then it was the diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism work that I was really, really passionate about. And I always have been passionate about. And I think within medicine, like a lot of careers, I had noticed, I have an eye for kind of noticing the ways that there are inequities built into the systems we participate in. And I had just noticed the amount of uncompensated labor and the differing expectations I saw placed on my colleagues who identified as women and those who identified as men. And I had a very impactful mentor who is actually a white man who was a full professor. And he basically told me to only engage in those professional activities that were of meaning to me, and to stop engaging in work that was not meaningful and that was not compensated. And that was a huge shift that I took and have carried with me in my career. And I think it translated into the way that I looked at motherhood. Because just like in medicine, not everyone cares about DIA work, and that's not where they're going to want to spend their time. That's fine for them to define what being an academic or a physician or an educator looks like for them. And so I had to define what I wanted motherhood to look like for me, and then feel confident stepping into that role, stepping into that life, and not worry about what other people might think about me. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to be comfortable and proud of my own decisions as both a person, but as a mother. And I take it very seriously also because I'm raising two young girls, and I want them to grow up seeing that you, as a young woman in this world, your values, what's important to you, your passions are important, and you should feel free and brave to step into the type of life and future that you want and create that for yourself, free of societal expectations. And so I really try to live that out for my girls more than anything.
I love that. And that is a word. One of the things I want to ask you before we go, which I think really relates to this, is how do you then define success? What does success look like for you? And what are you trying to model for your girls as they think about as you think about them becoming human beings, right? And looking for some level of success in their life?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And to be honest, I think success for me has looked like different things at different times. I think when I was earlier in my medical career, it had a lot to do with the titles that I held, the roles that I held, the influence that I had within a given department and wanting to affect change in that way. And I think as I've gotten older and reflected more on my own values, success really means living a life that is of meaning to me, to my values and the things that are important to me. And so right now I feel like I'm in a season where I want to welcome all things that bring joy, that bring abundance and bring ease. I think I operated so long feeling like being in a challenging, tired state was somehow a sign of success. And now I'm in a place where that doesn't define success at all for me. What defines success to me is having meaningful relationships with the people that I care about, taking care of myself in a way that allows me to engage in the activities I want to with my kids and my partner and my friends, and do what I can to ensure that I'll be around for my children as long as possible. And also that I'm walking in my own truth and checking in with myself if the things that I engage in, the work I choose to do, the rest I choose to take aligns with what's most important to me. And if I've done that, that to me is a sign of being successful. I want to raise girls who are brave, who are strong, who are kind, who are committed to equity and justice. And I think more important than the books I read them or the lessons that we talk about around the dinner table are really the life they see me leading as their mother and the life they see my partner leading, our relationship to each other, what that looks like, and the way that we move through this world and make an impact in this world.
I think that's beautiful. So, Maria, if people want to know more about you or the Collective for Anti-Racism in Medicine, where can they go?
Yes. So aligning with my own values and what is of meaning to me, I am not currently on social media, but you can always find us and contact us at thecollectiveaim.com, or if you Google the Collective for Anti-Racism in Medicine, our website will come up there, and you can learn more about the work we do to address racism and work towards health equity with academic institutions and healthcare organizations.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Whitney. This was so much fun.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Savvy Working Mom podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen in. Also, make sure to link up with us at thesavvyworkingmom.com and on Instagram at thesavvyworkingmom. And please just share this podcast with any other mama who you think might enjoy or benefit from it. Until next time, remember, with intentional and daily action, you can live your best days now and forever.